लिए मिशन जल जीवन शुरू किया है और अगले कुछ वर्षों में इस पर लगभग $50 बिलियन का खर्च करने की हमारी योजना है। एक्सेलेंसीज, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंच की बात करें तो लगभग 80 देश हमारी इंटरनेशनल सोलर एलायंस की पहल के साथ जुड़ चुके हैं। मुझे प्रसन्नता है कि भारत और स्वीडन अन्य पार्टनर्स के साथ मिलकर इंडस्ट्री ट्रांजिशन ट्रैक के लीडरशिप ग्रुप का लॉन्च कर रहे हैं। यह पहल सरकारों और निजी क्षेत्र को साथ लेकर इंडस्ट्रीज के लिए लो कार्बन पाथवेज बनाने में अहम भूमिका अदा करेगी। वैश्विक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नेचुरल डिजास्टर्स का सामना कर सके, इसके लिए भारत कोएलिशन फॉर डिजास्टर रेजिस्टेंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की शुरुआत कर रहा है। मैं सभी मेंबर स्टेट्स को इससे जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। इस साल भारत के स्वतंत्रता दिवस 15 अगस्त को हमने सिंगल यूज प्लास्टिक से मुक्ति के लिए जन आंदोलन का आह्वान किया है। मैं आशा करता हूं कि इससे वैश्विक स्तर पर सिंगल यूज प्लास्टिक के खिलाफ जागरूकता और बढ़ेगी। एक्सेलेंसी, मुझे आपको बताते हुए प्रसन्नता है कि यूएन की इस इमारत में कल हम भारत द्वारा लगाए गए सोलर पैनल्स का उद्घाटन करेंगे। द टाइम फॉर टॉकिंग is over. The world needs to act now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would now invite to the stage Her Excellency Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany.
We all have heard, indeed, the wake-up call of our young people, and I would like to thank the Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, for making it possible for us and for young people also to meet here before the General Assembly. There can be no doubt whatsoever that climate change, global warming, is primarily caused by human beings. And this is why we have to heed the advice of our scientific communities. It is a global challenge that can only be met if we stand together, because we only have one planet, all of us together. So the yardstick for our action needs to be the Paris Climate Agreement that puts down a framework that will allow us to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. The industrial nations are those that have caused global warming as we see it today. The developing countries are those that suffer most from this phenomenon. And this is why, as we, as representatives of the industrialized countries, have the obligation to put our technology, the best of our knowledge and our finances into stopping global warming as we know it. Germany sees its responsibility on the international stage and on the national stage. Internationally, we shall increase our funding for global climate protection from 2 to 4 billion euros compared to 2014. In particular, we will earmark 1.5 billion and pay this into the Green Climate Fund. We are working for resilience, climate insurance policy, and we have been active for years, and we will continue to do so in protection of forests. At the national level, we have the following situation. Germany, is 1% of the global population, and stands for 2% of global emissions. If each and everyone around the planet would act as we do it, global emissions would double, and everyone is more than aware of what this means. So By 2030, we want to reduce our CO2 emissions by 55% compared to the base year of 1990, and in 2050 we want to be climate neutral. In 2030, we want to get two-thirds of our energy from renewables in 2022. We will phase out the last of our nuclear power plants. At the latest, in 2038, we will phase out coal. We shall initiate a turnaround in our transport sector over the next few years, and also, as regards the insulation, for example, of buildings, we have earmarked for the next few years 55 billion for innovation, for technology, for new mobility, in insulation of houses and in new heating. We will invest this money in these areas, and we will introduce a CO2 pricing, not to the extent that we are already doing it right now in the European Union for industry and energy. We shall also enhance this, first at a national level and later on, hopefully, also at a European-wide level, by pricing in transport and insulation of buildings. Because we think that only if we develop a convincing pricing scheme will we be able to use what is left by way of a sort of limit and will not it will not be increasing that. We obviously have to put down the necessary incentives in order to take people along. There are people out in the streets who protest and who try to convince us, but there are also those who are still doubtful that climate change actually exists. And we have to try and take these people along. We in Germany have tried to do this by the measures we agreed on last Friday, by what we have done so far. We will give a contribution to a sustainable business and to sustainable management, and we shall give our contribution to these funds also globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Our next presenters represent member states, the private sector, and local authorities that are committed to a carbon-neutral world. Let us hear next from them. I invite now His Excellency Sebastián Pinera Echenique, President of Chile, His Excellency Sauli Niinistö, President of Finland, Mr. Michael Bloomberg, UN Special Envoy, Ms. Valérie Plante, Mayor of the City of Montreal, and the CEO of Alliance, Mr. Oliver Bäte, to take the stage. President Pinera, as leader of the country hosting the next COP, you have the floor to let us know your plan.
Thank you. Muy buenas tardes.
Good morning to all of you. Humans are the most intelligent creatures living on Earth, but also the only ones able to destroy their own planet, and that is a contradiction we must face. Climate change signs are conclusive. This is not an issue of ideology or belief. It is science. We must listen better to science. All of the prognoses show that we're on the wrong track. Just one example, the last 5 years are going to be the hottest temperatures that ever have been recorded in the history of humanity. As a consequence, there is no doubt whatsoever that faced with this reality, we must change the way that we do things. For a long time now, nature has been crying out in agony, saying, "Protect me, care for me, so that I can protect and care for you." The planet, nature, can exist without us. We cannot exist without them. That is why the commitment that we countries are making today is essential. Today we have the highest concentration of greenhouse gases in the last 800,000 years. Consequently, there are two options. Either we wait and see what happens and we face the consequences, or we decide to change the course of history and do what we should have done a long time ago. For that reason, we countries must recognize that reality has gone beyond us, that the scope of climate change and global warming and their perverse effects are going a lot faster than what we ourselves and scientists had anticipated. This is why, with great commitment and enthusiasm, we take up the task set us by the Secretary General, and I thank him for convening us, to make progress on two fronts in terms of mitigation and adaptation. With the assistance of the United Nations, in a short time, we have managed to have 30 countries commit to carbon neutrality before 2050, and 66 countries have announced a commitment to achieve more ambitious, more demanding goals than those NDCs to be determined at the COP25 in Chile this year. The most important recent event was the Osaka summit, where countries like England, Germany, France, Spain, Holland, and Chile committed themselves to be carbon neutral. Chile is making progress with four major tools. First of all, achieving full decarbonization of its energy matrix and replacing it with clean, renewable energies from the earth, water, and the oceans. The second is changing our public transportation system from fossil fuels to electricity. The third is to set demanding standards of energy efficiency in all sectors. And the fourth is an ambitious reforestation plan. Chile is one of the countries that has a specific characteristic, one of the few countries in the world where the forest mass is growing and not shrinking. For all of these reasons, besides a commitment of moving from a culture based on everything being disposable to a culture where everything is recyclable, and from a linear to a circular economy where everything is reused, Chile is setting a clear path. Commitment is not only to nature, it is a moral commitment to ourselves, to our children, to our grandchildren, and to all the coming generations. As was so aptly said this morning, they have the right to live on Earth, and it would be very sad for them not to be able to see blue skies and green fields, except in history books. So in COP25 in Chile, we will have the most ambitious demands and expectations. And we will also incorporate care for the forests and of the oceans as priorities as part of the fight against climate change and global warming. The time for action has finally come. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. President Niinistö, Finland is aiming at carbon neutrality before 2050. We'd love to hear your outline for your plans to achieve this.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Mr. Secretary General for his leadership in convening us here today. I hope that we make history today. The scientific evidence and case for the urgency of climate action is beyond all doubt. We have to do something. We heard young people during the weekend earlier on today here. The question, or what Greta Thunberg said, they will be watching us and they will not let us go. This must be taken very seriously. I start from Finland by telling that we try to convince ordinary Finnish people to take notice in their daily life on climate change. We tell them that it doesn't limit your life if you start looking at your waste of food, or recycling your needs and deeds, or later on more demanding, like do I really have to do all the trips I'm aiming to do or used to do? Because surely they know that one individual can't have that much impact, but the mindset is here most important. If everybody has a mindset in keeping in mind that my behavior has an impact to climate change, such a mindset would spread to us politicians. It would be easier to make decisions if we know that people understand it. To business life, that would also enlarge the mindset. Secondly, just before this meeting, I received a message from Lord Nicholas Stern. He wrote, "Ambition depends on finance, and finance follows ambition." Finland and Chile have together collected a coalition of finance ministers. There are 40 of them now. They have agreed on Helsinki principles. The idea is that systematically in ministers of finance, they will study while talking about taxation, budgets, innovations, investments. They will also check what is the environmental impact, what is its impact on climate change. This means a systematic process. And I understand, Mr. Bloomberg, that you have planned something quite similar to corporates. That is very positive. Then to Finland itself, our national climate targets belong now to the most ambitious ones in the world. Our government is committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2033. We aim to become carbon negative soon after that, as the first industrial economy in the world. The bar is very high, but we want to lead by example. We need to accelerate our emission reductions, and we need to strengthen our carbon sinks. But we know that new technologies and innovations will help in this. Moreover, we have a very solid record on our earlier commitments. In 2015, Finland was among the first countries to adopt the Climate Act. We have banned the use of coal in energy production by 2029. The use of fossil oils in heating will end by 2030. To conclude, let me assure you that we in Finland are fully committed to decisive climate actions, globally, in coalition with others, and nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. And now, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, as UN Special Envoy for Climate Change, you've been a leader, a front-runner for climate action, including to help lead the fight to end coal use. What are some of the most important action items you can discuss to reach net zero emissions?
Well, let me start by thanking President Pinera of Chile and President Niinisto of Finland for their leadership on this issue. They are spearheading the coalition of finance ministers for climate action, which is also working to increase transparency around climate change. And President Pinera's leadership will be critical in the upcoming climate summit in Chile. That summit is an excellent opportunity to put today's commitments into action. And let me also thank President Trump for coming today to the United Nations. Hopefully our discussions here will be useful for you when you formulate climate policy. The most important thing that we can do is to phase out coal as fast as possible, and we are making progress. Since we started Beyond Coal in 2011, more than half of the United States' coal plants have closed, 297 out of 530. Through Beyond Coal, we'll close every remaining one of those. Net zero emissions is an ambitious but achievable goal, and non-state actors can lead the way. A growing number of U.S. cities and states and businesses have committed to reaching net zero emissions. These states would by themselves form the world's fourth largest economy. The Secretary General has called for no new coal plants to be built after 2020. That would be an enormous step in the fight against climate change, and it would save a lot of lives. So today, Bloomberg Philanthropies is expanding our global coal work with the aim of reaching the goal the Secretary General has called for, no new coal plants after 2020. And we will work with countries around the world to accelerate plans for new clean energy projects. We'll bring together public and private sector leaders to share technical expertise and help make the economic case for clean energy. We have a lot of work to do ahead, but there's nothing we can't achieve if all sectors of society work together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Bloomberg. Mayor Plante, you've committed your city of Montreal to be carbon neutral. I guess the question is, why does this make sense for your city, and how will you be able to achieve it?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here as the Mayor of Montreal in Canada, and I'm speaking for all of the cities around the world that have committed to combating climate change. We know that by 2050, 2/3 of the population of the world will be in towns and cities, so we have to ask ourselves, how can we make ourselves more resilient? I hope that what you take from my statement is that cities are already committing and are already working actively to combat climate change, but that there is much more that we can do, and that we are dedicated to doing the extra things we have to do, but we need more support from states, but also from the private sector. That's absolutely essential. The Secretary General set ambitious objectives for states in reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030, and also by achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. And I can say that cities are ready. We are ready to respond to these commitments, even if certain cities, such as Montreal, has already gone further. The Secretary General has asked us today to make strong gestures. In talking about Montreal, we are trying to increase our objectives by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. It's a very ambitious objective, we know, but we know exactly what we have to do. And cities know what they have to do. They know, for example, that we need to reduce the use of cars with just one person in the car. We also know that we have to make our buildings carbon neutral. I'd like to hail the Zero Carbon Building Initiative that will be launched this week. It's a very good initiative. We also should know that cities don't act alone. We know that, well, we're lucky to be in various networks. There's the C40 network, and there's the Global Covenant of Mayors as well. And these networks give us the necessary energy and allow us to share best practices. With that in mind, as the ambassador for local biodiversity, I'd like to recall that the fight against climate change is, of course, absolutely necessary and important for our populations, but also for preserving local biodiversity. Of course, I'm thinking of flora and fauna. And to make achievements on this, we have to be specific. And I'll give the example of Montreal. I took the decision to stop a real estate project that would have destroyed the last green spaces in Montreal and would have encouraged 10,000 more cars within the city. So I set aside the financial objectives to instead preserve these wetlands. So this is something that's very important, and it's an example that other cities can also make use of. The forthcoming COP conference will also be very important on biodiversity. In conclusion, when we are trying to combat climate change, I think we shouldn't forget the other fights that are also connected to it, the fight for social justice, the fight to preserve the most vulnerable communities and to ensure that those communities are also part of the solution. And last but not least, a word for the young people who have mobilized. I want to thank them. I want to thank them for having pushed us, the civil society actors, those in the private sector, heads of state and mayors. They have pushed us to respond to the climate threat. I think that young people have reminded us every day that this is an inherit from our ancestors that we pass on to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our last presenter for the first theme of carbon neutrality comes from the private sector, Oliver Bata, CEO of Alliance SE. An exciting announcement from the financial sector. Mr. Bata, you have the floor.
Europe's largest institutional investors have the honor for and be a part of 12 large asset owners that have come together to address climate change. We are often asked why we're not moving of more than 2.4 trillion and is growing every day. Together we've decided we can drive change not just in the world but in the real world. Together, with the support of the environment and its partners, we have built a convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance that we are presenting today for the first time. Today, we commit to full transition of all our investment portfolios to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, with strong intermediary targets every 5 years. Thank you. Just to be clear what this means, that the global economy, which we strongly influence, reflected in our portfolios, needs to move rapidly from 37 gigatons to 3 gigatons annually before 2050. This is a very ambitious journey, we know that, but we also believe it's a huge business opportunity and also an economic imperative, not just a societal one. Jointly, we will advocate for corporate and industry action by engaging with companies to change their business practices to ensure net zero carbon emissions. So it's not just about investment and divestment, it's about dialogue. We do invite all other investment and asset owners globally to join us in this alliance to really shape a powerful movement. First and foremost, by the way, the sovereign wealth funds. There should be no reasons why government-controlled money cannot support us. And we do this with the expectations that our own governments will follow through their own commitments to the Paris Agreement. We will hold them accountable as well. We heard this morning from our young generation and our own children's. We have to do something, and the service sector should not just follow, it has to lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bata. Thank you, Mr. Bata. Thank you to all the presenters on our panel on carbon neutrality. We're going to move now to another key topic in our global efforts to combat climate change, and that is finance. The Secretary General invited France, Germany, and Qatar to lead the efforts in this area towards the summit. Therefore, it is my honor now to invite His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of France, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Emir of Qatar, and His Excellency Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, to take the floor. I'd like to take this moment to urge all of the presenters today to be mindful of the time constraints, limited to 3 minutes per remarks. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. Pleasure.
No, I understand French. I'm okay. No, no.
Monsieur le Président, you are an advocate for more climate ambition, no doubt. Why is this fight so important to you and to your President Macron?
Okay. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, heads of state and government, ministers, friends. In a few words, I was very struck by the emotion in the room when some of the young people spoke earlier. I was lucky to speak to some of them, and in many of our countries, each week for months and months now, we've had young people speaking, and I think they've identified an absolute urgency that we have to respond to here. Because we need to say, we're doing what's necessary. But things aren't going quick enough. Even if you're aware of things that aren't working, you're not going quick enough. That's one of the things they're saying to us. They also say that we're not sufficiently involved in the response. And so I also want to play my role in listening to them. I think that no political decision maker can remain deaf at this call for justice between generations. And I think that collectively, our young people, our societies, our companies and our investors, heads of state and government, should rebuild a joint understanding of the world. We need to change our habits so that we can work together. Because if not, we will have these denunciations that no action can respond to, and then we'll also have actions that will be insufficient, even though we're saying that we're doing what we should be. So the only way to have a useful form of action working with our young people is also to establish understanding and to transform our collective system to respond to this imperative of the fight against climate change and for biodiversity. And we need to build useful actions. We need our young people in our countries to tell us to work faster. We need the young people to help us to change things, to act and to put more pressure on those who are recalcitrant, whether they are states or financiers or companies. This is what the three of us have been doing in most recent months, and following the UN Secretary General's mandate, we're trying to make progress. And I think that there is an action agenda that isn't about being self-satisfied, but it should be a positive agenda. Firstly, we as heads of state and government need to work collectively to respond more quickly. We need to keep to the Paris Agreement and to be consistent with its objectives. I'm very pleased, firstly, today that we've had the good news of the ratification of the Paris Agreement by Russia. That is wonderful news. It wasn't something we expected a few months ago, so that's a sign of progress. And I think it's worthy of applause. Secondly, if we want to act, and we want to act powerfully, we need to move towards carbon neutrality by 2050. We've built this coalition that continues to build with Chile, Japan, and other countries who have joined. I know that China is also moving, and India has given encouraging signals. This is an essential instrument. Within this framework, Europe needs to do more. And from 2020, Europe should take very clear decisions so that we can be up to the wishes of the new EU President Ursula von der Leyen of reducing our emissions yet further by 2030. So reducing emissions by 55% by 2030, meaning Europe will have to work more quickly. It will also have to be ambitious. We'll have to have a minimum carbon price that is higher than the current one. This is essential if we want Europe to be up to its own expectations. And within that framework, France will take on its responsibilities. We have already ended any new oil exploration on French soil. Now, the second part of this positive agenda, I think we need to have a trade agenda that serves the climate agenda. I think that a great majority of us believe in an open world, believe in a world of exchange, of trade, a world where we do trade, where trade is a factor of peace, where trade can also bring people out of poverty. Nonetheless, today we have to realize that our young people, and sometimes ourselves, we don't understand how the world works. We want to collectively take back control. We want to ensure that we have regional sovereignty and that we have a control of things and we understand what's happening. And so for that, we need to have a trade agenda that is consistent with our climate agenda. When we are trading, we have to be consistent. I don't want to see new trade negotiations open with countries who are running counter to the Paris Agreement. I think that that would be deeply hypocritical given all of the debates that we continue to have today and also in previous days. At least at European level, because that is a level that I can think at, we need to have a carbon neutral Europe and we need to have zero imported deforestation. This is essential. This is a deep change. It is a real revolution, and it doesn't mean that we don't import certain things, but that any imports good news from the United States. I hope that that will come during this General Assembly. But I'm calling for each of you who have not yet done so. I'm calling on each of you who have not done so to increase your contribution to the Green Fund. I know that our Japanese friends are also want to see this. I know that the Emir of Qatar also has news to share with you, so I'm counting on each of you. Action, action, action. We cannot leave our young people continuing to spend all of their Fridays protesting. We saw the emotion this morning, and we have to do everything that is necessary. There's still work to do, but let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Merci. Your Highness, Emir of Qatar, the floor is yours. We want to hear your views on how to advance climate finance.
فخامة الرئيس إيمانويل ماكرون.
Your Excellency President Emmanuel Macron, Your Excellency Prime Minister Andrew Holness, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset it gives me pleasure to thank His Excellency the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his efforts in preparing and organizing this important summit. The phenomenon of climate change is undoubtedly one of the serious challenges of our time. It is a worsening challenge, causing many problems, including economic, environmental, and social problems. This phenomenon has very serious repercussions for all forms of life, including human life, and for both developed and developing countries alike, especially their efforts to achieve sustainable development, which all peoples aspire to. This serious phenomenon makes it necessary for the international community to cooperate and to double its efforts to confront it and to reduce its repercussions. We don't need to look further than the devastation wrought by Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas and the suffering of its people to realize the dire need for such cooperation. All states must fulfill their responsibilities and honor their commitments under international agreements. Honorable guests, the State of Qatar has assumed its responsibilities as an active partner in the international community to confront climate change. In 2012, we hosted the 18th session of the Conference of States Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Doha Carbon and Energy Forum, which brought together international experts to develop public policy recommendations for the energy sector and for governments on climate change, as well as on alternative energies, as well as carbon capture and storage. The State of Qatar has also spared no effort to ensure the success of the negotiations on the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015. At the national level, the State of Qatar, and as part of our National Vision 2030, has taken many measures to develop technologies taking into account climate change and clean energy, as well as the optimal use of water to reduce the loss of desalinated water and to encourage the recycling and the reuse of water. We have sought to improve air quality and promote an efficient use of gas and energy, and encouraged waste recycling and green spaces. In the same context, and in order to achieve our long-term environmental goals, the State of Qatar has prepared a set of goals. Most importantly, those related to renewable energy to generate 200 megawatts from solar sources within the next 2 years, and eventually 500 megawatts. We are also seeking to regulate carbon pricing as a means of reducing emissions and driving investment towards cleaner options. As a host of the 2022 FIFA World Cup, we are committed to organizing an environment-friendly tournament, the first carbon-neutral tournament in the world, through the use of solar-powered stadiums and cooling and lighting technologies that are water and energy efficient. I would also like to point out that the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund plays an active role in combating climate change through the Qatar Investment Authority, a founding member of the One Planet Global Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was established in accordance with the initiative of His Excellency President Macron to promote green investment and accelerate efforts to take into account climate change issues in the investment sector and in the management of sovereign wealth funds. The Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund will promote and encourage green investment activities and will adopt low-carbon economic growth, which would help realize the climate goals of the Paris Agreement and would support the SDGs and allocate investment to sustainable natural resources. Ladies and gentlemen, as Qatar seeks to play its role as an active partner within the international community, I announce that the State of Qatar will contribute an amount of $100 million for the support of small island developing states. And least developed states to deal with climate change, natural hazards, environmental challenges, and to build their capacity to counter their destructive effects. In closing, I wish this summit all success, and I hope that we will achieve our goals for the good of humanity. Thank you. May the peace and mercy of God be with you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica. Clearly, the islands are on the forefront of the feelings of the effects of climate change. Your voice needs to be heard in this room. The floor is yours.
Colleagues, friends, the global financing system requires immediate transformation to support action to tackle climate change. For the past year, Jamaica has been co-leading efforts to make this happen. The transformation must be science-based, technically appropriate, transparent, and supported by accurate and inclusive tracking methodologies. Here are some of the things that we have been looking at and advocating. The Paris Agreement, Capital Transition Agreement, risk scenario analysis tools already applied by 600 financial institutions worldwide could be adopted by private institutions and private investors to align their portfolios with the Paris Agreement. The task force on climate-related financial disclosures should be used to better inform investors on climate-related risks. We were very happy to see yesterday the principles of responsible banking adopted by over 130 banks from over 45 countries, representing more than $47 trillion in assets. In addition, 42 major central banks and supervisory authorities have come together under the Network for Greening the Financial System. We encourage increased global participation in this valuable framework. We applaud the private sector-led Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, which seeks to address pricing and redistribution climate risk. Jamaica looks forward to being one of the first countries to pilot this initiative. On the public sector side, the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action is actively promoting the incorporation of climate change reality into macroeconomic planning and public financial management. Jamaica has joined this coalition of expert practitioners, and for example, we will be making greater use of risk transfer instruments to mitigate against financial risks of natural disasters. Jamaica's effort to achieve fiscal discipline have not been without sacrifice. It is essential, therefore, that we have access to innovative, low-cost, and flexible financing windows to protect our hard-earned economic stability. We therefore welcome the commitment by multilateral development banks to further mobilize $40 billion of climate change investments from private sector investors annually by 2025. This includes important provision of technical assistance, use of guarantees, and other de-risking instruments. We also welcome their announcement of doubling adaptation financing to US $18 billion annually by 2025. We are encouraged by the pledges made yesterday at a luncheon Jamaica co-hosted with Norway for the replenishment of the GCF, and where we urged more developed countries to also double their contributions. I close by reiterating the concern of developing countries that the delivery mechanisms for climate finance are still fragmented and slow. The bottlenecks and gaps in the project investment value chain prevent climate finance from getting to where it is most needed. We are encouraged, however, by new and exciting developments, such as the Closing the Investment Gap Initiative and the Climate Investment Platform, which hold great promise and will expand to meet the investment and technical assistance needs of more developing countries. Colleagues, there is no silver bullet for climate finance challenges. However, by supporting and promoting existing and new initiatives, we will be taking action that the younger generation is demanding. Remember, they are watching.
Thank you, Excellency, and thank you to all of our presenters. The next panel is brought to you by the Secretary General, who has asked all countries, as you know, to stop authorizing new coal power plants by 2020. A shift from coal to renewable energy is not only possible, but also necessary, in his view, from the social and economic perspectives. We will now hear from leaders that are embarking on this shift. I invite now Her Excellency Zuzana Chaputova, President of the Slovak Republic, Ms. Jane Burston, Executive Director of the Clean Air Fund, Mr. Henrik Paulsen, CEO of Ørsted, and Mr. Jose Ignacio Sanchez Gallin, CEO of Iberdrola, all to take the stage. And again, in the interests of time, we ask that each participant limit their remarks to 3 minutes. President Chaputova, let's begin with you. Your country has a decarbonization strategy and a coal phase-out date that's very ambitious. Tell us, why did your country decide to fast-track that transition?
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in the best time in history, enjoying enormous progress, but we forgot to pay the bill. We are in debt to this planet. We are the first generation that feels the impact of our reckless actions. And we may be the last one that can do something about it. To name just one thing that worries me the most, then it is the denial that the climate crisis exists or is in no way serious. To address the climate crisis while living in this denial will to lead our failure. We need to globally define new rules and their enforcement. We need rapid and profound change of policy in how we do business, produce power, manage transport, make investments, protect biodiversity, and manage natural resources to change our lifestyle. Let me be concrete. In Slovakia, we made a politically unthinkable decision to close our coal mines. It will need a serious transformation of part of our country to give people new jobs, open new businesses, and create new opportunities. We already produce 80% of our energy low on carbon. We are on the way to increase emission reduction from 40% to 45% by 2030. We committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Just a few days ago, we made a decision to allocate additional €2.5 billion for climate investment by 2030. Internationally, we contribute to the Green Climate Fund. We support the plan of the European Union to make Europe the first carbon-neutral continent. Moreover, we are part of the climate initiative of Austrian President van der Bellen. No matter how small or big we are, we all can contribute without waiting for others to start. We must make sure that in the end, everybody can benefit from climate action. It will be successful only if it increases the well-being and dignity of all people, in particular those most vulnerable. Finally, I believe that if we succeed to unite on our climate action, we can generate a new sense of solidarity and common good. It can help restore international system, overcome divisions, and bring new opportunities in areas of peace and development. Because protecting our environment means being human. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Ms. Burton, as Executive Director of the Clean Air Fund, tell us about the links between coal phase-out to clean air and people's health, and what can philanthropy do to contribute?
Thank you. Air pollution kills 7 million people every year, and many millions more suffer with chronic conditions that are caused or exacerbated by air pollution. I want you to imagine what that actually means for a second. I want you to imagine the schoolgirl gulping for air on the roadside because of an asthma attack brought on by air pollution. The families finding out that they're going to lose a parent to lung cancer. The baby whose lungs and brain will never fully develop because of air that his mother could not avoid breathing. This is a public health emergency, and it's getting worse. However, tackling air pollution offers us a really huge opportunity. An opportunity not just to save millions of lives, but at the same time to avert dangerous climate change and to strengthen our economies. The causes of climate change are very often the same as the causes of air pollution. Burning fossil fuels like coal is one of them. It contributes 2/3 of outdoor air pollution. The solutions, therefore, can also be the same. Renewable energy, electric mobility, more walking and cycling, to name just a few. And in economic terms, the OECD and the World Bank calculate that tackling air pollution will actually save us money, trillions a year. And because almost everybody is affected, people will back the solutions and the leaders who implement them. Today, I'm pleased to announce the Clean Air Fund, a new philanthropic fund being set up to achieve clean air for all. We've raised $50 million in new commitments, halfway towards our target of $100 million. Our donors are the philanthropic foundations of the IKEA Foundation, Children's Investment Fund Foundation, Oak Foundation, Bernard Van Leer Foundation, the Guys and St Thomas's Charity, and the FIA Foundation. Thank you. And whilst that's a great start, that's a really great start, it is just a start. So I urge the leaders gathered here today to respond to the World Health Organization's call to action and to put tackling air pollution at the top of your agenda, because clean air is a human right, and together we can make it a human reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Mr. Poulsen of Ørsted, your company's abandoning fossil fuels in favor of renewables. What's the reasoning, if you could share with us, for this ambitious decision, and how has it impacted your business?
Yes, thank you, Secretary General and Your Excellencies. Let me tell you a brief story about the transformation of our company. Less than a decade ago, oil, coal and gas were at the very core of our business model. However, our company came under increasing financial pressure 7-8 years ago, and we basically had to start changing the business model. At the same time, we fully recognize that there is a profound need to start changing the energy system towards a greener and more sustainable one. Our old business model based on fossil fuels had to be replaced by a new model that was environmentally and also financially sustainable. Therefore, we made a wide-ranging decision to start shifting the entire business away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. Since then, we have divested our oil and gas production, and we've reduced our coal consumption by more than 80%. From 2022 onwards, we will stop using coal altogether. Our CO2 emissions are down 83% compared to 2006, and by 2025, our production will essentially reach carbon neutrality. In isolation, these decisions reduced our short-term profits, but they were critical components in a broader transformation of our company and our commitment to help lead the way towards a more sustainable energy system. Parallel to moving out of fossil fuels, we have been investing $25 billion into renewable energy, and Ørsted is today one of the world's largest green energy companies. Our journey over the past decade hasn't been easy, but it has been necessary. We have in recent years delivered shareholder returns that are among the best in our industry, and Ørsted is today a global leader in offshore wind, a technology which over the past 10 years has developed from a niche to a rapidly growing global technology. Scaling up offshore wind has driven down the cost of the technology by more than 60% since 2014. It is now cheaper to build offshore wind farms than developing new
coal or gas-fired power plants. The same, by the way, is true for onshore wind and solar energy. This is a major breakthrough for the green transformation. The renewable energy technologies that we need to fundamentally transform the energy system and radically reduce emissions are at our disposal, and they are cost efficient. The significant cost reductions in offshore wind demonstrate how governments setting clear and ambitious targets provide investment visibility for the private sector, which again drives innovation, cost reductions, and large-scale deployment. When governments around the world, assembled in this room, set ambitious targets and enact clear policies, the private sector can and will further accelerate the build-out of green energy. And this is urgently needed to speed up the retirement of old coal-fired power plants and to put an end to the construction of new coal-fired capacity. If we cannot get this done, the 2-degree scenario is out of reach, let alone the 1.5-degree scenario. And when needed, we must be ready to make near-term sacrifices to get it done. And as it was said earlier today, business as usual is indeed not going to be enough. We cannot tell our grandchildren that we failed to protect the planet because we were too focused on protecting our own well-being. We must act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Mr. Sanchez-Galan, Iberdrola is a pioneer in changing its business model and increasing its share of business in clean energy while supporting that transition. Can you explain why you decided to steer that company in this direction?
Okay, thank you very much. So Iberdrola has been a traditional utility for more than 100 years, with traditional standard mix as well, coal, oil, nuclear, hydro. But we started our energy transition 20 years ago, inspired by Kyoto Protocol. We invested in the period more than $100 billion in wind, solar, smart grid, and storage, in training our teams, and we had already closed all our oil and coal power plants in the period. Today, the results are here. We are now a much bigger company, much cleaner, more international, and a world leader in renewables worldwide. Our emissions per kilowatt hour in Europe are a fourth of those of our European peers, only 80 grams. And we plan to reduce it by half by 2030 and reach zero by 2050, thanks to the investment of more than 40 billion in the next 5 years. We have proven that the green economy generates industrial opportunities, more wealth, more and better jobs, and not only for us. We promoted local industries in depressed regions into more technology-intensive sectors. An example, for instance, is transforming shipyard into offshore wind. My message is that the energy transition to zero emissions is feasible because we already have technology able to supply the energy for a more electrified world at a very competitive cost. But the time is short. We now have to measure precisely who is doing what and how much is being done, and distinguishing between green energy and greenwashing. Each of us has a responsibility. We as companies investing in clean technologies, and governments in adopting faster procedures. Today, to build, for instance, a wind or solar farm takes 12 months, but administrative permitting can take 4, 5, or even more years. The NDCs have to address this. To conclude, it's now time for action. It's time for results and accelerate the execution of plans to reduce emissions. It's a moral obligation to live a better world and a healthier environment, in particular for the youth, and now we have the opportunity and the responsibility to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallen, and thank you to all of our presenters. I'd like to invite to the stage now His Excellency, Mr. Carlos Alvarado Quesada, President of Costa Rica.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, Secretary General, Excellencies. I would like to ask you to imagine this. It is possible for a country to support its economy with electricity coming from 99% renewable sources. Is it possible, yes or not? Or no? Is it possible for a tropical country that had the highest rate of deforestation in the world in 20 years to revert that process? Is it possible, yes or no? Is it possible to achieve growth and economic well-being at the same time as we invest in nature, yes or no? Today, what I want to tell you categorically is that the answer is yes. Yes, we can do it. Yes, it is possible, because Costa Rica, as a middle-income country, has been able to do this. There is no excuse for countries with more resources and possibilities to do the same. These are complex times. We are at a turning point marked by science, pointing out that time is running out to respond to the climate crisis and its effects on the survival of species. Today, young people are calling us to take urgent action to speed up the transformation of our economies, to decarbonize them, and to reduce the scale to which the most vulnerable populations are affected. Mr. Secretary General, you asked us to come with actions to New York and not with speeches. Let me tell you the following. First of all, last February, Costa Rica launched the decarbonization plan, our long-term strategy with a goal of reaching zero net emissions in 2050. To implement this, we have taken a series of specific actions, including first, extending a moratorium to keep fossil fuels underground where they belong. No exploration, no exploitation. We created a law to incentivize electric power. We removed taxes from vehicles powered by electricity. Third, we are mobilizing over $30 million a year derived from taxes on fossil fuels, and we are investing them mainly in nature, especially forests. Fourth, in the past 10 years, Costa Rica invested more than $5 billion in infrastructure to guarantee renewable energy production, hydroelectric, wind, or hydrothermal. We have provided the entire national territory with recharging stations, and the electric-powered vehicle fleet has grown by 500%. We have committed ourselves to achieving 60% of forest cover by 2030. Today, we have 52%. The 30% of public transportation has to be zero emissions by 2035. Also, Mr. Secretary General, we have committed to build 2 electric trains fed by clean, renewable electrical energy with an investment of over $1.5 billion. Still, this is not enough. We have to do more. This is why Costa Rica is committed to pushing forward our vision on a global multilateral level. We are working on different platforms, such as the NDC partnership, as co-chairs with the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And also, we will host the pre-COP25, an unconventional pre-COP, to be held 2 weeks from now in Costa Rica, to continue supporting the global campaign for nature and to promote the 30 for 30 goal with gender inclusive and human rights inclusive goals. We know that transformations produce uncertainty and even fear that may paralyze some, but we must not stop. It is possible to make a transformational change with economic growth and an improvement in the quality of life. Let us work together to achieve what seems impossible today. If our house is burning, we should not be paralyzed by fear. We should be driven forward by action to inspire us. Thank you very much, and pura vida.
Thank you, Excellency. I would now like to invite to the stage His Excellency Muhammad Yusuf Kalla, Vice President of Indonesia.
Distinguished heads of states and governments, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by saying, we hear you, Greta Thunberg. The world as our house is falling apart. We are in a climate emergency. Extreme weather due to climate change have rendered disaster-prone countries even more vulnerable. Indonesia is a case in point. 50 years ago, our forest is vast, 150 million hectares, becoming the lung of the world with the Amazon. Now we only have 90 million hectares due to exploitation for the world's need in the past. Land and forest fires that have broken out in parts of Sumatra and Kalimantan are worsened by the impact of climate change. So we need to have common action to take care of the world's lung. Though it's not easy, Indonesia has taken serious measures to tackle this huge challenge. We no longer have the luxury nor the option but to increase our adaptation and mitigation for climate change ambition, to take concrete yet realistic climate actions. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia has taken various steps to curb greenhouse gases emission. With an ambitious target of 29% with own resources and up to 41% with international support by 2030. Indonesia has launched the Low Carbon Development Initiative, an initiative that goes hand in hand with economic and social benefits. Indonesia has also intensified its climate actions through nature-based solutions by restoring 2 million hectares of peatlands and rehabilitating 12 million hectares of degraded land by 2030, and rigorously conserving and restoring mangrove and coastal areas. Energy transition by removing fossil fuel subsidies, stipulating a mandatory biodiesel policy, and developing green fuel refineries. Indonesia will establish a dedicated environmental funding facility to facilitate climate financing and support other environmental programs. We invite international partners to join in our funding facility. Ladies and gentlemen, the successful implementation of Paris Agreement lies not on individual but on collective efforts. On the energy transition, we urge the scaling up of funding support and technology transfers for affordable and accessible renewable energy. On sustainable oceans, we need to accelerate progress on ocean-based climate actions. Indonesia cannot do this alone. Climate action needs collective actions. Together we need to build a healthy planet for the future of human race. Our children and their children deserve a safe future. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I would now like to invite to the stage His Excellency Wang Yi, State Counselor and Special Representative of President Xi Jinping from China.
Your Excellency, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, China highly commends and supports the Secretary General's initiative for convening this summit. Climate change is a common challenge to all countries. To jointly tackle this challenge and protect the planet we all call home will be a journey critical to the future and destiny of mankind. In tackling climate change, we must first be determined to win the fight. We must honor our commitments, follow through on the Paris Agreement and its implementation guidelines, and see to it that both this summit and the COP25 will produce positive outcomes that will inject fresh impetus into the post-2020 multilateral process. The withdrawal of certain parties will not shake the collective will of the international community, nor will it possibly reverse the historical trend of international cooperation. Second, be prepared to take sustained actions. We must ensure that our climate actions are mutually reinforcing with our socio-economic endeavors, realize a transformation toward green and low-carbon development, and enhance climate resilience in the process of accelerating development. We must mobilize stakeholders and resources across all sectors to scale up pre-2020 actions to avoid shifting responsibilities to the post-2020 process. Third, be committed to cooperation. We must uphold multilateralism, especially the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities. Respect the need for development and the special conditions of developing countries and help them build preparedness. Developed countries, on their part, need to take the lead in reducing emissions and honor their commitment of mobilizing $100 billion a year in climate finance by 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, as a responsible member of the international community, China honors its words and keeps taking actions on climate change. Well, guided by a new development philosophy, China is pursuing high-quality growth and following a path of green, low-carbon, and sustainable development. Last year, China's CO2 emissions per unit of GDP dropped by 45.8% from the 2005 level, overshooting the annual target. It is also a reduction of 5.26 billion tons of CO2 emissions. Also in 2008, 2018, its share of non-fossil fuel in primary energy consumption reached 14.2%, and the forest stock increased by 4.56 billion cubic meters from 2005. Since 2000, China has contributed to a quarter of the world's newly afforested land. Last year, China saw an increase of 1.25 million new energy vehicles, outnumbering many other countries in the world. China is also actively developing a national emissions trading market. China will faithfully fulfill our obligations under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement and realize as scheduled its nationally determined contribution targets submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat. We'll continue to jointly build a green belt and road. Through the BRI International Green Development Coalition and other platforms, we are mobilizing stronger support for international cooperation against climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, co-leading the track of nature-based solutions, or NBS, China has been collaborating with many other countries and international organizations and have gained fruitful results in the following aspects. First, a deeper insight into the relations between man and nature. NBS advocates harmonious coexistence between man and nature and values ecological progress, thus fully leveraging the role of nature in enhancing the effectiveness of climate actions. Second, new measures for addressing climate change. We have proposed over 150 initiatives and set up a group of Friends for NBS mechanism to tap the mitigation potential of nature in order to cut CO2 emissions by 10 to 12 billion tons annually. Third, fresh support for the Sustainable Development Goals. We have compiled a list of over 30 case studies, including in forest carbon sink and biodiversity protection, to demonstrate how NBS can significantly promote coordinated economic, social, and environmental development, thus enabling better implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Ladies and gentlemen, long and difficult as the journey of tackling climate change may be, sustained actions will take us to the destination. By working together, we will build a clean and beautiful world where we will enjoy shared prosperity and a shared future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Let me now invite to the floor Her Excellency Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, His Excellency Felix Chilombo Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, His Excellency Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan, His Excellency Jimmy Morales Cabrera, President of the Republic of Guatemala, and Mr. Faber, CEO of Danone. Once again, we remind speakers, in the interest of time, to remain within the 3 minutes allotted. In this next section, we will hear examples of immediate positive action from different regions throughout the world that show us what is being achieved through nature and how the private sector is advancing with the financial shifts that are required to ensure nature-based solutions are delivered at scale. We're going to begin this session with Prime Minister Khan. Your country is increasing emissions reduction through ecosystem restoration. What can you share with us on this item?
Well, you know, 6 years ago, we discovered that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries because of climate change and global warming. 80% of all the water in our rivers comes from our glaciers, which are in the Himalayas and in the Karakoram and in the Hindu Kush range. And we found that our glaciers were melting at a much faster pace. We discovered almost 5,000 glacial lakes because of global warming. So 6 years ago, we decided to plant 1 billion trees. And I'm very pleased to say that we actually planted 1.1 billion trees in the last 5 years. Now we have set ourselves a target of planting 10 billion trees in Pakistan in the next 5 years. And what we need from the world community is partnership, because clearly climate change is something which individual countries can't do anything unless and until the world gets together. Pakistan only contributes less than 1% to the greenhouse gas emissions. Yet we are number 7 country that is most vulnerable to global warming and climate change. So therefore, we are hoping that the world community contributes, joins in. My 2 fears, what I fear for the future: one, that obviously if the temperatures keep rising at the rate they are, we face catastrophe, because millions and millions of people depend on the water from our rivers. But my other worry is, and this is, I think, even more serious, that the world is not taking it as seriously as it should be. I fear that somehow some countries think that because climate change doesn't immediately affect them, they are not taking this as big as an issue it is going to be. Because eventually no country will be not affected by climate change. What we feel is that there will be climate refugees. Already in Pakistan, because of prolonged drought in Afghanistan, there have been refugees coming into Pakistan, climate refugees. But if the world does not take this seriously, I think the richer countries will be affected. So my appeal today would be that powerful countries must chip in and take this seriously. Because unless the world community decides to take this challenge on, no individual countries are going to be effective. And human beings have this capacity that once they decide to fight a crisis, a challenge, they can surmount any challenges. But problem is, do they understand the gravity of the situation? And I hope by the time this conference ends, most of the world leaders do. Thank you.
Minister Khan, I understand you have to leave. Thank you for your efforts and thank you for your brevity. I appreciate it. We're going to move now to Prime Minister Solberg of Norway. Can you please share how Norway and others are enhancing climate commitments and promoting nature-based solutions to restore the ocean, reduce deforestation, and support the SDGs?
Well, Excellencies and delegates, we need to step up, to speed up, and to scale up. This is the message that the young people across the world have given us. It is reinforced by the images of devastating natural disasters, most recently from the Bahamas. And Norway is responding with increased ambition and action. We will strengthen our national determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, and we urge others to do the same. We will also submit a low-emission strategy to the UN. And I'm pleased to confirm that we will follow through on our Paris commitments to double the contributions to the Green Climate Fund. And in addition, we will continue to provide substantial support to countries that reduce deforestation. And allow me to say a few words also on behalf of the high-level panel of sustainable ocean economy. The panel is comprised of 14 heads of states and governments across the globe. Together, we call on the world to step up ocean-based climate action. The oceans are severely affected by climate change. But today, we released a study showing how the oceans can also provide solutions at scale. Ocean-based climate action can reduce the emission gap by up to 21% by 2050. A sustainable and healthy ocean economy will be crucial for fighting climate change. It will provide jobs and food security. It will help to protect biodiversity. We urge all of you to join us in accelerating the key ocean-based climate actions. This will help us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. And we will want to invest in nature-based climate solutions, scale up offshore and ocean-based renewables, rapidly decarbonize ocean industries, promote sustainable, resilient and low-carbon sources of food from the ocean, and advance the deployment of carbon capture and storage below the seabed, and scale up ocean observation and research. Coalitions of committed ocean industries are joining us in this work. So let's make COP25 a blue COP and use the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon to secure real ocean solutions to climate change.
Thank you, Excellency. And now, President Chilombo Chizekti, can you please elaborate how the Central African Forest Initiative will help fight climate change, protect forests, and contribute to sustainable development in your region?
Bien, merci.
Thank you very much, Madam. It's an honor for me to speak here today, since I represent the sub-region of Central Africa that has mobilized as part of this summit through the Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS. As you know, around 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions are captured by forests and peatlands. We all know that nature offers us very effective and cheap long-term solutions. Fortunately, our region has one of the most beautiful and most important pieces of global heritage, the forests of the Congo Basin, which are an important part of the response to these challenges that threaten our beautiful planet. These magnificent forests are unfortunately still not very well known and not properly valued by the international community. They cover some 250 million hectares, with a stock of 70 billion tons of carbon. They also absorb around 750 million tons of CO2 per year. These forests, therefore, play a crucial role in regulating the climate. The forest of the Congo Basin also provides a regulating impulse for rainfall from Ethiopia to Egypt. Nonetheless, a number of signals indicate that Central Africa could be the next front for massive deforestation, which would repeat the history of the other two large forest basins of West Africa. The disappearance of this ecosystem would cause an unprecedented ecological crisis. It would destabilize the whole of Africa because of a huge loss of biodiversity, because of desertification of the sub-region, and thus would create considerable pressure through migration. We should remain concerned and mobilized by the situation in Lake Chad and its heavy socio-economic consequences. Adaptation to climate change for some spaces in Africa is inextricably linked to the efforts that we take to save forests. This is why we, as heads of state in the sub-region, are very well aware that the actions that we take will affect the global ecosystem. Without being exhaustive, and by way of an example, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has committed to stabilizing its forest coverage as 63% of its territory and reducing its emissions by 17% between 2020 and 2030. Gabon and the Republic of Congo have coverage of 88 and 60% of forest across their territories. They have banned the deforestation of high carbon stock forests and also forests that are valuable for conservation, while also keeping deforestation of all kinds of forest to a minimum. Applying the principle of zero deforestation, countries that have savanna lands like the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Gabon have decided to take their agro-industry production outside of forest zones. The two Congos have also committed to preserving and providing sustainable management for our peatlands, which represent around 30 billion tons of carbon, by avoiding drying out these lands or draining them. For Gabon prevented the export of timber and made the certification of all forest concessions obligatory. It has also signed a historic agreement with Norway through the CAFE initiative to compensate for emissions reductions of 150 million American dollars by valuing a ton of carbon dioxide at $10 rather than $5, so doubling its price. On the Democratic Republic of the Congo, I intend to increase the protected area significantly, including certain watercourses across our territory, to strengthen preservation and the preservation of biodiversity. My country is also committed to accelerating universal access to electricity for its population, to end dependency on wood, which represents 90% of the energy consumed by households. This dream can become reality. Our hydroelectric potential comes to 100,000 megawatts, and this could resolve a lot of the problems in terms of energy needs. But outside the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Inga site also comes under the NEPAD framework as a driver for the industrialization of Africa. The Secretary General has made a call, and in response the countries of Africa have committed to actualizing their nationally determined contributions for 2020. And the priority here is the integration of land use and forestry. We should also reflect these considerations in our discussions with the Bretton Woods institutions, because it is hard to understand how the best conserved forests in the world only receive 1% of the financing available. We have to do more together: government, multilateral organizations, NGOs, and above all, the private sector. Only if we work together will we be able to preserve the forests of the Congo Basin. We need a balanced solution, taking into account our development needs and our efforts for preservation, but also the value of our ecosystem services. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. President Morales, Central America is very much exposed to the worst effects of climate change. Can you elaborate, please, on the commitments your region has made on using nature to not only reduce emissions, but to enhance resilience?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Today is a very special day. It's not just because it's my granddaughter's first birthday, but also because I have the opportunity of sharing the commitment that we Guatemalans have with you, the commitment to preserve nature and stop climate change. I wish all of you a very good day. Guatemala is convinced of the importance of nature for climate action. For this reason, protection of the environment and management of natural resources is one of the 5 major axes of our government plan. Returning to the commitments made in Abu Dhabi in July, when we spoke of presenting actions, not speeches, I can say that we've made progress towards the target of restoring and reforesting 1.2 million hectares of trees from today until 2032. We have made remarkable progress in this work, and since I took power, we have invested $200 million in this project. Today, at the regional level, we have joined the initiative of conserving the 5 major Mesoamerican forests, which are the second lung of the Americas. For environmental protection, Guatemala has worked strongly to decrease pollutants, and even though we only generate 0.04% of world pollution, we are one of the 10 most vulnerable countries to the effects of climate change. We also conduct lasting processes of informing and training citizens to care for the environment, for reforestation, and for restoration. This has generated educational processes backed by the National University of Guatemala, and which has reached, until now, over 65,000 people, mainly women. We have made a lot of effort to clean water resources, increasing the number of wastewater treatment plants. And now we have 300 water treatment plants, up from 50. We also have over 200 bio filters. We filter out floating waste, and approximately 60% of solid floating waste in the country's rivers have been eliminated. And in this way, we have prevented the pollution of both beaches and oceans. These artisanal systems have also built a community strength to clean rivers, and they have been adopted in other countries of the Americas, such as Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and recently in Mexico. We have received requests to share this invention with countries in the Asia-Pacific, African, and other Latin American countries. These biofilters have been described by the World Economic Forum as an exemplary invention which inspires and contributes to environmental conservation. I'd like to take this opportunity to share that we have initiated the process of registration according to the standards of the World Intellectual Property Organization for the state of Guatemala of the biofilter invention. And it will be a legacy of the state of Guatemala to humanity to preserve rivers, lakes, and oceans of the world. In the comprehensive protection of natural resources, I'm pleased to inform you that we've started the process of prohibiting the importation and distribution throughout Guatemala of single-use plastic bags, of plastic straws, and polyethylene utensils, and we're opening the door to environment-friendly products. Since 2016, with Taiwan, we have conducted over 100 projects covering a large number of sectors, including those mainly targeted towards fulfilling the SDGs. Taiwan has been a strong partner for Guatemala and has supported these projects in their development. I'd like to summarize by saying that Guatemala is fully committed to the importance of nature in climate action. God bless you and have a very good day.
Mr. Faber, how are companies collaborating to enhance climate action through investing in sustainable food systems and supply chains?
Thank you. Good morning. Forgive me to cut it short, but the food system that we have built over the last century is a dead end for the future. In essence, we thought that our science could change the cycle of life and its rules. we thought we could engineer the life that we needed and kill the rest in the fields. The resulting monocropping consequences are standing right in front of us now.
I'm really being asked to...
We depend for 2/3 of our food on this planet on only 9 plants today. And 40% of our lands are already degraded. In a nutshell, we have broken the cycle of life. And the missing link is the biodiversity in our fields. So today we are launching the One Planet Business for Biodiversity, which is a coalition of, to start with, 20 of the largest food and other agri-based companies in the world that commit to put nature-based solutions at the heart of our strategies, our processes, our supplies. We are going to focus on 3 priorities on which we will come back to you when Kunming Conference of Parties will happen next year. The first is that we will shift our practices towards regenerative agriculture to restore soil health, to create a future for our farmers. The second, using the thousands of brands we have in our portfolio, we will create a demand for a variety of crops, of species, of traditional seeds that are forgotten today and that are dying. And the third is we will answer the need for an urgent change in the way we address deforestation and we protect wildlife and wild biodiversity. The total sales of this coalition today is about $500 billion, 100 countries where we operate. It looks big, but it's not. It's only a start. We need many more partners, and in particular, we need your support. That's why I'm here today. We need your support to shift agricultural subsidies from killing life into supporting biodiversity. We need your support to make sure that we can find a pricing mechanism for the incredible, invaluable externalities that nature is providing us all and farmers every day in the world. And finally, we need your help to curb finance and make sure that finally they support this agenda. I know it's not going to be easy. When it comes to nature and climate, it takes leadership and courageous leadership. I would really like to beg you to listen to our youth. They are demanding this regenerative culture in the streets and beyond. I would like to invite you also to listen to this inner voice in each of us that whispers that life is sacred. This is where we find our energy every day, in the fields, in the factories, on the markets, to turn this huge tide, because we've been killing life and we now need to restore it day by day, one by one. So with your support, we'll report back in 1 year from now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our presenters. Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite to the stage Her Excellency Katrín Jakobsdóttir, Prime Minister of Iceland. And again, in the interests of time, I implore all speakers to keep their remarks within 3 minutes. We are running quite a bit behind. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Urgency is the key theme in this Climate Action Summit, and make no mistake about it, we are really facing a planetary emergency. We need to act now to save the future. If we do not start to decrease global emissions now, we may reach a point of no return, with ice caps melting, coral reefs becoming extinct, rainforests dying. It is not an exaggeration to say that this catastrophic climate change is a threat to civilization and humanity. And this can cause fear, but fear alone does not always inspire good decisions. Most of all, we need hope. The threat is real, but so are the solutions. Is averting disaster hard work? Yes. Will it cost? Yes. But smart policies can keep the cost of climate action low and bring many benefits to society and economy. Iceland's electricity and heating now comes 100% from renewables. Was this hard work? Yes. Did it cost? Of course. But clean energy transformation was perhaps our best investments in terms of both the economy and the quality of life. And I am convinced that the investment we are making now in implementing an energy shift in our transport system is going to be vital to fight the climate crisis, but also going to be a very good investment for our society and our economy. In Iceland, we have lost 95% of our woodlands since settlement and half of the fragile volcanic soil. And we are now reversing this. Our island is getting greener. This year, the government launched new projects to heal the land and soak up carbon from the atmosphere. At the same time, we are using innovation to pump carbon dioxide underground, transforming carbon dioxide into solid minerals in basaltic rock. The solutions are at hand to reach carbon neutrality, and Iceland has declared its goal of becoming carbon neutral in 2040. Globally, we need to do more to protect carbon sinks, plant trees, and reverse desertification. We need a price on carbon, an end to dirty subsidies, greener lifestyles, and clean investments. We need a stronger green climate fund, and that's why the Icelandic government has decided to double our contribution to the fund. Ladies and gentlemen, last night I participated in a goodbye ceremony for a known glacier in Iceland called Ok. That is no more, and the first of many glaciers to follow. The message of the vanishing ice is one of urgency, but not despair. We humans can reach the moon if we want to. We can save the Earth if we really want to. We will need hope. We will need cooperation, green technologies, and relentless persistence in breaking the old, dirty habits that die hard and advance clean solutions. We all need to do more and better. This is what science tells us, and the message of the young generation is very clear. We have no excuses not to act now. We are here in New York to pledge to do more and better. Let this summit be a summit of actions, actions that speak louder than words. Let us embrace hope, and let us ensure that all our actions against the climate crisis will also result in climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Her Excellency Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark. Prime Minister, you've recently formed a government with very ambitious climate targets, and you're also co-leading the strategy on energy transition coalition here at the summit. Could you let us know your plan as Prime Minister and how you can go even greener?
Thank you so much. Every generation will face a defining challenge of their own, a possibility for us to change the world. Only a few generations have proven brave to actually do so. Today, climate change is our defining challenge, and future generations depend on us. The UN Secretary General calls for all of us to take the leadership, to take more action, and to do it faster. Denmark is ready to do both. And together with our coalition partners in the energy transition track, we have come up with concrete ideas. Many are being presented on stage today. I want to thank Ethiopia as a co-lead and C4All for an excellent cooperation on the energy transition. A work of critical importance, if you ask me, because energy accounts for 80% of CO2 emissions. Clean and smarter energy can provide 90% of the reductions needed by 2050, 90%. And transition is possible. When America, this great country, put a man on the moon, almost all of Denmark's energy production was based on fossil fuels. Today, it is less than half. We have proved in Denmark that clean energy can go hand in hand with progress. And now we have decided to raise the bar even further. Last year, a unified Danish parliament set out to reach climate neutrality with a net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. And this year, my newly formed government set the target even higher, a reduction in 70%. 70%, imagine. Will that even be possible? Dear friends, if it wasn't difficult, it wouldn't be ambitious enough. We will push for changes where it needs it most urgent: agriculture, transport, buildings, fashion, and much more. We are going to redouble our efforts when it comes to raise more forest in Denmark. And just last week, we decided to double up the earmarked funds for green research and innovation. And even then, it will be hard for us to reach 70%, especially because we need a just and fair transition without inequality raising. We stand ready to share our experiences and take further international leadership. Therefore, today, Denmark is offering to continue to take the lead when it comes to fulfilling SDG number 7. No country, no company, no organization can handle this alone. I think we have to admit that future generations rely on us to act, and Denmark is of course ready to take some of the leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I'd now like to invite to the stage His Excellency Iván Duque Marquez, President of Colombia.
Excellencias,
Excellencies, delegates, the world is suffering from the consequences of climate change. We are seeing how glaciers are being destroyed, how coastal erosion is increasing, how many communities are being affected, how we've seen a rise in sea levels, and also how many natural disasters are getting worse. This situation requires from us that we act with determination, with a sense of urgency, that we understand that this is the greatest challenge of our time, the challenge that requires action from everyone. My country, Colombia, represents only 0.4% of the entire global emissions of greenhouse gases. We have the sixth cleanest energy matrix in the world. We have 50% of the plains and the planet, and more than 40% of our territory can be considered a tropical rainforest, most of it located in the Amazon. But I'm saying all of this because despite the fact that we represent, or we have such low levels of greenhouse gas emissions, Colombia is one of the countries that is most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And all of us, starting with us, we have to take action and act decisively and in a coordinated fashion. In the light of climate change, the message that I would like to convey to you is that we must all think globally, but have the ability to act locally. And that is why we have to speak about specific actions. We've been in government for only a year and a half, but we understand that it's this government, the government of a new generation, that has to take the leadership and take action, which would make it possible to provide an example and motivate Colombian society. The first action which I'd like to share with you has to do with the energy transition that is taking place in Colombia. A year ago, when our government took office, we had barely 0.1% of our energy matrix in renewable and unconventional energies, such as solar and wind energy. In a year, we've tripled that, and our goal is to reach 10% in 2022 and 20% in 2030. The steps that we take from now to 2022 will be from less than 50 megawatts to more than 1,050 megawatts. And I'm pleased as well with the fact that we've also participated with several countries at the global level. Now 8 countries, including Chile, Peru, Honduras, Costa Rica, Salvador, Ecuador, Guatemala, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. They are collaborating with us, and our goal is that for 2030, 70% of the energy sources will be renewable energies, so that we can show the commitment of an entire region in the light of these challenges. We've also transformed our vehicle fleet. We've passed the Electrical Mobility Act, and we've also provided tax incentives so that we can have cleaner transportation. We have also set a commitment with the private sector. All corporations that invest in renewable energies and in energy efficiency, we will allow them to discount the 50% of their investment from the corporate income tax, so that we can understand that this is a motivation for all sectors. And in a year, we've managed to obtain in that energy transition the lowest number of the particles in air pollution. And we've also moved towards access for the most vulnerable communities in a country where almost 1 million people don't have electricity. In a year, there are more than 16,000 families which are receiving family energy for the first time with individual solar panels in their homes. And our goal is that 400,000 Colombians by the year 2022 will also have that solution in their homes. Our commitment, delegates, excellencies, is also to fight against deforestation. We have converted the protection of natural resources to a matter of national security, tackling illegal mining, the cultivation of illicit crops. And of course, we've managed to prevent an extension of agriculture in an irresponsible fashion. So all this has meant that in only a year, we have reduced deforestation by almost 17%. And we will continue to be committed to this. And furthermore, we aim to plant 108 million trees for the year 2022, so that we can protect our common planet and we can continue to involve communities. And I'm pleased as well. I'm pleased to say with great pride that at the beginning of this month, with Brazil, with Peru, with Ecuador, with Bolivia, with Guyana, and with Suriname, with Brazil, with Colombia, we have signed the Leticia Pact, a pact to protect the Amazon, so that we can have indicators, so that we can have the possibility of sharing management and protection and prevention. And in that way, we can protect as well this important legacy of humankind. These actions, these measures are what encourage us on a daily basis. And it also has meant that in a year, we can say that we have an agenda of sustainable cattle rearing, where we can reduce extension, increase rotation, have more productivity, and use the pastoral schemes more effectively. And our goal is to 1,100 hectares, so that we can also undergo transformations in processing, and we can also do this in harmony with the reduction of greenhouse gases. We have, in a year, we have obtained the first regional circular economy policy, and today we can participate in this coalition with tropical forests so that we can all understand that this is something that involves all of us. Dear delegates, our goal is to reach 2050 with this great coalition that would make it possible for us to be at a level of zero carbon. And we would like to involve all of the ancestral groups, the indigenous groups who take part in our strategies, receiving payments for their environmental services. This, what I'm telling you, is just the beginning of a government that wants to undergo and enact a major transformation in the 21st century, which would allow all of us to have something to contribute to face the destruction of climate change. A few days ago, we saw young people of the world calling for action on our part, and the time has come for all of us to move from speeches to actions. The time has come for us to go from offices to the land, and this is the most important theme of our time, and all of us here will have to show that we are determined to tackle this and to leave a better legacy and a better home for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. The next presenters from member states and the private sector will highlight actions that will lead to climate-resilient futures. I invite now His Excellency Josiah Vorenke Bainimarama, Prime Minister of Fiji, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of Nigeria, His Excellency Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mr. Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, and Mr. John Haley, CEO of Willis Towers Watson, to come to the stage. And as you're preparing, I remind you once again that we are running quite a bit behind, and in the interests of time, we implore you to try to keep within the 3 minutes allotted to each speaker. Are the translation devices? As we wait for the translation devices to come out on stage, just another quick reminder, we are running quite a bit behind. Trust me, I don't want to cut anybody off, and yet I'm being asked to. So if you see me, oh, all English, okay. Here we go. We're going to start with the Prime Minister, Bainimarama. As a vulnerable Pacific island nation of Fiji, and as a consistent climate champion, we would be grateful if you could outline Fiji's efforts to transition to the resilient future that we're discussing today.
Thank you. On behalf of Fiji, I rise to answer the call of the Secretary General for more ambition and more action to wrestle our planet from the grasp of the climate crisis. Fiji stands committed to uniting behind the science, an impatient plea that the world's youth just demanded from each of us. The brutality of our changing climate has already driven vulnerable communities into a nightmare scenario, one in which the hellscape of storms like Cyclone Winston and Hurricane Dorian have become the new normal. Even if we limit temperature rise to the 1.5 degree target without urgent adaptation, our suffering will go for generations and claim many more innocent lives. Acceptance of this living nightmare is morally unthinkable, and denial is unconscionable. Every nation must heed the call of our youth to wake up and begin building towards a vibrant, resilient future. Fiji's view of what must be done is clear. We have submitted our long-term strategy to achieve net zero emissions before 2050. We are nearing completion of our enhanced NDC. We enacted an environmental and climate levy, issued a green bond, and are using innovative financing solutions to fund these plans. We are relocating climate vulnerable communities and infrastructure We are striving to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030. And we are finding creative ways to reduce emissions from our biggest emitter, transportation, including public transport and shipping. We are promoting climate-resilient agriculture and are finding nature-based solutions to protect our forests, our mangroves, and riverbanks. We are enshrining our commitment to the Paris Agreement through a new climate change law, which is currently undergoing public consultations. We are ensuring that our oceans are an integral part of both the UNFCCC process and our own national development, pursuing 100% sustainable management of our economic exclusive zones by 2030. We have declared a 10-year moratorium on seabed mining, and I have asked others to join us to allow for research and properly assess the environmental hazards. Why, as a tiny carbon emitter ourselves, are we taking such drastic action? The answer is simple. While Fiji did not cause the climate crisis, we are fully awake to its reality. Someone must act with clear-eyed purpose and resolve. Someone must clear a path for others to follow. If we fail or if we falter, our children and grandchildren will have no path at all. Thank you, Secretary General, for this opportunity to speak at this summit and for your understanding, foresight, and unrelenting passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. President Buhari, Nigeria has a very young population. Perhaps you might highlight what a pathway for a resilient future looks like.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I share the sentiment expressed by the Secretary General that the world is on the verge of climate catastrophe. Undeniably, climate change is a human-induced phenomenon. It is now imperative that we must step up our collective climate actions in line with the request of the Secretary General. It is in this regard that I wish to reiterate Nigeria's commitment to its obligation under the Paris Agreement, the aspirations enshrined in our national determined contribution, and ensure a resilient future that mainstream climate risks is our decision-making. I want to announce that the government of Nigeria will develop a more robust sectorial action plan and expand the scope of our sovereign green bonds in line with our intended upward review of Nigeria's NDCs towards the inclusion of the water and waste section by 2020. We will take concrete steps to harness climate innovative ideas by including youth in decision-making processes as part of our overall climate governance architecture. We will mobilize Nigerian youth towards planting 25 million trees to enhance Nigeria's carbon sink. In the energy sector, Nigeria is presently diversifying its energy sources from dependence on gas-powered system to hydro, solar, wind, biomass, and nuclear sources. Specifically, Nigeria is progressively working to realize 30% energy efficiency and renewable energy mix by 2030. This is envisaged to lead to 179 million tons of carbon dioxide reduction per annum by 2030. I should also inform the summit that our government has introduced climate-smart agricultural practices to unlock 74 million tons of carbon dioxide per annum through relevant technologies, advocacy, and best practices. As you are aware, the Lake Chad Basin, which used to be a region of productivity, food security, and wealth for an estimated 40 million citizens living around the lake basin, has shrunk significantly from its original size due to climate change. We will continue to lead in efforts to have solid partnership for the ecological restoration and recharge of the Lake Chad. We are confident that this would improve the living conditions of diverse nationals living in the area, promote interstate cooperation, strengthen community resilience, as well as assist in addressing the environmental and security crises that threaten the region, its resources, and inhabitants. I'm glad the Secretary General and some of the member states presented in this hall are partnering with us in this endeavor. We shall thank them for their cooperation, and I look forward to deepening our partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. The Netherlands are doing a lot on adaptation and resilience at home and abroad. Prime Minister Rutte, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered together to address the defining challenge of our age. Climate change is happening. The impact is real, the time to act is now. These are not my words, but those of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon back in 2007. And to me, it shows that the time for words and political promises is over. We need ambitious climate goals and solid measures for achieving them. Without urgent climate action, the Sustainable Development Goals will remain out of reach. In the Netherlands, we are raising the bar. We are going to reduce domestic emissions by 49% by 2030 and 95% by 2050 compared to 1990. And at the EU level, we are even setting our sights on climate neutrality by 2050. To reach our goals, we have a set of measures that are both specific and broad. They include phasing out all coal-fired power plants by 2030, imposing a targeted carbon levy on industry, and stepping up our efforts in offshore wind. We have laid down these measures and more in a national climate agreement. An agreement we fleshed out with over 100 partners from all areas, ranging from trade unions and NGOs to major corporations and the financial sector, in keeping with the deep-rooted Dutch tradition of securing broad support from across society. We asked independent experts whether we will be able to achieve our goals in this way and whether the financial burden will be shared fairly between businesses and citizens. And they gave us the green light to go ahead. And this shows that it is possible to set ambitious and widely supported climate goals at a national level. But climate doesn't stop at our borders. So in Europe, the Netherlands is calling for climate neutrality by 2050. And I support Commission President-elect Ursula von der Leyen in her plans to raise the EU's reduction target for 2030, possibly to 55%. Worldwide, the Netherlands is spending over 1 billion euros on climate programs, half of which consists of publicly mobilized private capital. And with the NDC partnership, we provide support to developing countries to help them implement more ambitious climate policies. We also work with our financial sector to improve its climate impact. As a nation that's been fighting against water for many centuries, we are also looking forward to hosting the Climate Adaptation Summit in 2020. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the Netherlands is working in all kinds of ways to ensure an ambitious policy nationally and internationally. Sharing experiences is an essential part of this. And we are keen to contribute to this exchange based on our experiences with our national climate agreement. Because we are very aware that although climate action begins at home, we are all in this together. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you. Mr. Carney of the Bank of England could speak to us about many issues related to the financial sector and climate change, but today he's here due to his leadership on mainstreaming resilience into the decision-making process. Mr. Carney, just how critical is this issue?
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a new sustainable financial system is being built. It's funding private sector initiative, it's funding resilience, and it has the potential to pull forward the impact and actually accelerate the effectiveness of your climate policies. But like virtually everything else in the response to climate change, it's not moving fast enough for the world to reach net zero. To bring climate issues to the heart of financial decision-making, climate disclosure must become comprehensive, climate risk management must be transformed, and sustainable investing must go mainstream. And here's how. First, on climate disclosure. The demand for the TCFD disclosures that the Prime Minister of Jamaica referenced is now enormous. Current supporters control balance sheets of over $120 trillion. All the major banks, major asset management firms, insurers, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. The supply of that disclosure is now responding. Over 4/5 of the top 1,000 G20 countries are disclosing in line with the TCFD. But now these disclosures need to become mandatory, as the UK, Canada, and the EU have signaled. It's time for every country to get involved, because the world won't get to net zero if the financial sector doesn't know how our companies are responding. To watch, you need to be able to see. Secondly, on risk management, the providers of capital and those who supervise need to all improve vastly our ability to manage climate-related financial risks, because the changes in climate policies, the new technologies that will result, and the growing physical risks will prompt reassessments in the value of every single financial asset. And that's why the Bank of England is launching now the first stress test of a major financial system against different climate pathways, including the catastrophic business as usual and the ideal but still challenging transition to net zero. This initiative will bring the management of climate risks to the heart of the global financial system. But just as with climate disclosure, now is the time for others to join and go global. Finally, on returns, for sustainable investment to truly go mainstream, it needs to do more than screen out incorrigibly brown investments or finance deep green innovation. It must also catalyze and support the transition of all companies from brown to green. And at present, one of the biggest hurdles is the inconsistent measurement of this dynamic, so-called ESG. We need a common, richer taxonomy that captures 50 shades of green. And in that regard, I salute the proposal of the UN's climate financial leaders this week for transition indices. Only with such an approach can we make sure that our citizens, your citizens, can know where their money is being invested and whether it's being invested in line with their values. Excellencies, ultimately, the speed with which a new sustainable financial system develops will be also decided by the ambition of your climate policies. The more countries like the UK, like the EU, jurisdictions like the EU, turn their Paris commitments into legislated objectives and concrete actions, the new sustainable financial system will amplify the impact of your efforts by pulling forward sustainable investments and shutting down unsustainable activities. It's within our grasp to seize this virtuous circle. Thank you.
Mr. Carney, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carney. Mr. Haley, the Secretary General is delighted that you're here today to launch a private sector-led initiative to strengthen the market for resilient investment. You have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be able to address the UN Climate Action Summit on behalf of the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment. This coalition is a public-private partnership which was motivated by the UN Secretary General's call for action, and it brings together leading organizations from across the global finance sector, from governments, and also from international institutions. Our goal is relatively simple. It's to transform mainstream infrastructure investment and to drive a permanent shift towards a climate-resilient economy. We look to do this for all nations, but especially for the most vulnerable. Through some major innovations and reforms, we aim to save lives and also trillions of dollars in lost assets across exposed regions in the years and decades ahead. The case for climate-resilient investment is further strengthened by the expectation that 70% of this infrastructure investment will go to low and middle-income countries. Those societies and economies are typically more exposed to climate risk. And it's critical that these climate-vulnerable geographies and communities both continue to attract investment and also that this infrastructure is built to withstand future climatic risks. Until today, there hasn't been a concerted cross-industry effort that focuses on climate resilience. The coalition aims to change that dynamic. It wants to mandate the finance sector create the tools and the standards to both price climate risk and then to facilitate resilient investments. By building and implementing the economic case for climate-resilient investments, capital is going to flow more naturally towards the resilient infrastructure. The coalition is in its early stages, but it already includes companies from across the investment value chain with over $5 trillion of US dollars of assets under management, and alongside with governments and multinational organizations. There are three things we're going to start out committing to. First of all, by COP26 in November 2020, we will be developing analytical tools, including a physical risk pricing framework and the methodology to prioritize national resilient investment needs. Along with that, we're going to have a range of tools to prevent capital flight from the most vulnerable regions. Second, we're going to be creating some innovative investments. An example of that would be resilience bonds, and we're going to implement climate resilience across leading infrastructure investment funds, sorry. We've identified 6 country pilot projects where we're going to be testing these innovations and protecting economies and citizens' lives from growing climate risks. And then finally, we're going to be working in close collaboration with other related initiatives, such as the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. I'd like to again thank the UN Secretary General for providing the motivation to us as well as our coalition partners. In particular, I'd like to recognize the leadership and ambition of the government of the United Kingdom in bringing this coalition to life. Without their commitment and their energy, we would not be making this announcement today. Similarly, we've had great collaboration with the World Economic Forum. They've been instrumental in galvanizing and securing the commitment of our coalition partners. And then finally, I'd like to pay tribute to the efforts of Mark Carney, who has generated incredible momentum in the global financial industry in shifting the way these risks are considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haley. And thank you to the entire panel. Thank you to the entire panel, and thank you for your brevity. Despite the profundity of your remarks, you were able to do them quickly. Thank you so much. I'd now like to invite to the stage Her Royal Highness, Princess Lala Hassana from Morocco. Princess Hasna, you have the floor.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala maulana.
Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, I should like to pay a warm tribute to Mr. Antonio Guterres for convening this summit meeting. The degradation of our environment is now a tangible reality. It poses a threat that we must address together. As part of its nationally determined contribution, the Kingdom of Morocco, a country with low greenhouse gas emissions, has undertaken to reduce its emissions by 42% come 2030. An inclusive, comprehensive process has also been launched to reduce emissions beyond that figure. As a result, last November, my country decided to continue accelerating its energy transition, setting the more ambitious goal of securing 52% of its electricity production from renewable energy sources by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa, a continent which is suffering from the impact of climate change, must be a priority in our collective action. In this respect, the first Africa Action Summit held in Marrakesh set off an unprecedented dynamic, in particular through the operationalization of 2 African climate commissions for the Congo Basin and for the Sahel region. Together with sister African nations, Morocco has also launched the African Agriculture Adaptation Initiative, and my country has also set up jointly with Ethiopia a coalition for sustainable energy